That night, I sat in the parking lot of a Walmart on Route 9 and ate a granola bar I found in the glove compartment. It was the last food I had. I was 62 years old and I had nowhere to go. Let me back up. For 31 years, I worked as a structural engineer. I built bridges, overpasses, retaining walls, the kind of infrastructure people drive over every morning without thinking twice. I was good at it. Not famous, not rich in the way people mean when they say rich, but comfortable. I owned a 4-bedroom house in Millbrook, New Jersey, drove a truck that was paid off, and had a pension that was supposed to carry me clean through retirement. My wife, Carolyn, used to joke that I was the most boring success story she'd ever met. I took that as a compliment. Carolyn died 11 years ago. Ovarian cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to gone. I was 51, and for about 2 years after that, I functioned on autopilot. Going to work, coming home, heating up soup, going to bed. My son, who was 24 at the time, lived 4 hours away in Philadelphia. He called on Sundays, usually. That was enough. We weren't the kind of family that hugged a lot or said I love you out loud, but I genuinely believed, that if things ever got hard, we'd show up for each other. That belief cost me. The trouble started 3 years before that Walmart parking lot. The engineering firm I'd worked at for over 2 decades was acquired by a larger company out of Atlanta. They kept most of the staff but slowly restructured, and at 59 I was quietly moved to a consulting role with half the salary and none of the benefits. I didn't fight it. I had savings. I figured I'd ride it out another year or two and retire early. Then the market correction hit my 401k harder than I expected. Then the roof on the house needed full replacement, $42,000. Then the boiler. Then I made a decision I've regretted every day since. I co-signed a business loan with a former colleague named Vince. Not a close friend, just someone I'd known for 20 years. Someone I trusted because he wore the same kind of boots I did and talked about his grandkids at lunch. He defaulted on the loan inside of 8 months. The bank came after me for the full amount, $180,000. I sold the house. I sold Carolyn's car, which I'd kept in the garage like a shrine. I paid off the debt, walked away with $11,000 in a storage unit full of furniture, and called my son. His name is Jason. He's 35 now. He lives in a 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs outside Philadelphia with his wife Meredith and their 2 kids. I'd helped them with the down payment on that house, $50,000, which I never asked to be paid back. I mentioned that not to keep score, but because it matters to what came next. I told Jason what had happened. I was calm about it. I'm not a man who falls apart over the phone. I explained the loan situation, the house sale, where I stood financially. I asked if I could come stay with them for a few weeks while I figured out my next step. Maybe find an apartment nearby, maybe look for work. I said I'd sleep on the couch if I had to. I said I wouldn't be any trouble. There was a pause on his end. Then he said, "Dad, I need to talk to Meredith first." I said, "Sure, of course, take your time." He said he'd call me back in the morning. He didn't call in the morning. He called that evening, almost 24 hours later, and he sounded the way people sound when they've rehearsed what they're about to say. "Dad, Meredith's not really comfortable with the setup. The kids are in school, things are hectic here, and we just don't have the bandwidth right now." Bandwidth. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was standing in the parking lot of a gas station in Pennsylvania, watching a woman argue with her teenager at the pump across from me. Normal life happening all around me. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world kept moving. "Okay," I said, "I understand." I didn't understand. But I said I did, and I hung up and I drove to that Walmart parking lot. And I sat there in the dark eating a granola bar, and I let myself feel how small I'd become. I didn't call him back. I didn't ask again. I spent 2 nights in that parking lot. The third day, I drove to a motel in Trenton that charged $54 a night and took cash. I stayed there for almost 2 weeks, applying for engineering consulting work online and watching my $11,000 shrink. I found a few small projects, a retaining wall assessment in Delaware, a report for a county bridge inspection, enough to stay afloat, barely. I was sleeping on a mattress that dipped in the middle and eating diner breakfasts because they were the best value for the money, and I was 62 years old. And I didn't tell a single person how bad it was because I didn't know how. Then, on a Tuesday morning in October, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, Philadelphia area code. "Is this Martin Pollard?" "It is," I said. "My name is Eloise. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Henry Bassett. He's asked me to reach out to you personally." I didn't know anyone named Henry Bassett. I said so. "He's aware you may not remember him," she said. "He's asked if you'd be willing to meet with him at his home in Chestnut Hill. He'd like to speak with you before he's no longer able to." Something about the way she said it. "Is he ill?" I asked. "Yes," she said simply. "He is." I had nothing else on my calendar. I said yes. The address she gave me was in Chestnut Hill, which is a neighborhood in northwest Philadelphia where old money has lived quietly for about 150 years. I drove up a long gravel driveway flanked by oak trees that had been there longer than I'd been alive, and parked in front of a house that was large without being ostentatious, the kind of home built before people felt the need to announce themselves. A man in his 60s opened the door before I could knock. He introduced himself as Eloise's husband, James, and explained that he served as both Mr. Bassett's assistant and household manager. He walked me through a foyer with dark wood floors and high ceilings. past shelves of books and framed photographs of bridges. Actual bridges, iron suspension bridges, cable-stayed structures, truss designs, and into a sitting room where an old man was waiting in a chair by the window. Henry Bassett was 87 years old, and he looked it, but only in the physical sense. The frailty, the thinness in his wrists, the way his breath came with a little extra effort. His eyes were sharp and dark and completely present. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down, Martin. Thank you for coming." "I'm sorry," I said, sitting. "I don't think we've met." "We have," he said. "Though you wouldn't have had reason to remember. It was 19 years ago. You were working on the Kellerman Bridge project, the overpass on Route 30 in Berwyn. I drove by one afternoon during an inspection and my car had a blowout on the shoulder. You stopped. You helped me change the tire in the rain." I stared at him. "You were in a hurry," he said. "You told me you had to get back to the site, but you stayed until the spare was on. You wouldn't let me pay you. You shook my hand and drove away." I had a vague memory of something like that. A sedan on the shoulder, an older man, rain. The kind of thing you do and forget immediately. "I remembered your name because it was on your work badge," Henry said. "I kept it. I don't know why exactly, except that I'd been in a difficult period then, and something about your straightforwardness stayed with me. I had James track you down last year when I started putting my affairs in order." He paused to collect his breath. "I'm told your circumstances have changed recently." "They have," I said. I wasn't sure how to feel about being researched. "I asked James to be thorough," he said, without apology. "I'm sorry for the intrusion. I'm a man with limited time and I prefer to be direct." I respected that. "Then I'll be direct too," I said. "Why am I here?" Henry looked at me for a long moment. "Because I made a great deal of money over my life and I've spent the past 18 months deciding what to do with it. I have no children. I have a nephew who hasn't spoken to me since I declined to fund his third startup. I have causes I believe in, and those are provided for." He folded his hands in his lap. "And I have a small number of people I've never forgotten. People who did something unremarkable and didn't expect anything in return. I find that increasingly rare." He reached to the side table and picked up a sealed envelope. He held it out to me. "I'd like you to have this, Martin. You don't need to open it now. James will explain the details and my attorney will be in touch after the will is filed." I took the envelope. It was heavier than I expected. "I don't know what to say," I told him honestly. "You don't need to say anything," he said. "Just go build something useful." The corner of his mouth turned up. I found myself smiling back. I stayed for another hour. We talked about bridge design, about what had changed in infrastructure engineering since the 80s, about the way cities were rethinking the relationship between concrete and water. He knew more than most people half his age. When I finally stood to leave, he shook my hand. His grip was firm for a man that thin, and he said, "I meant what I said, Martin. Build something." I drove back to the motel in Trenton and sat on the edge of that sagging mattress for a long time before I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from a law firm called Whitmore and Delacroix, and a brief handwritten note in a careful slanted script. The letter from the firm explained, in careful legal language, that I had been named as a beneficiary in the last will and testament of Henry Allen Bassett. The amount was not specified in the letter. That would be disclosed at the formal reading, but it described the nature of the bequest as substantial and unconditional. The handwritten note said only, "A fair exchange for one rainy afternoon. Use it well." H.B. Henry Bassett died on a Thursday 8 days later. James called to let me know. I sat for a while after I hung up, thinking about a man I'd spent one afternoon with 19 years ago and 2 hours with last week, and how sometimes the people who see you most clearly are the ones you've known the least. The will reading was at Whitmore and Delacroix's offices in Center City, Philadelphia, on a Monday morning 3 weeks after Henry died. I wore the best clothes I had, which wasn't saying much. A gray sport coat I'd had for a decade and dark slacks. I sat in a conference room with a view of the street and listened to an attorney named Carver walk through the document. Henry had left a portion of his estate to a land conservation trust in Vermont, a portion to a scholarship fund at Drexel University's engineering school, and a portion to various individuals. When Carver reached my name, he looked up briefly before reading. The amount was $4.3 million. I heard it the way you hear something that doesn't immediately compute. Like when you're driving and a deer steps out of the woods and your brain needs a half second to catch up. $4.3 million. I exhaled slowly and looked at the table. Carver kept reading. I didn't hear the rest. I don't know how Jason found out. His wife Meredith had some connection to social circles that overlapped with Philadelphia's financial community. Or maybe Henry's death had been mentioned somewhere. Or maybe James had inadvertently said something. It doesn't matter how. Within a week of the will reading, I got a voicemail from a number I recognized. "Dad, hey. It's Jason. I've been thinking about you. Wanted to check in, see how you're doing. Give me a call when you get a chance. Love you." I listened to it twice. Then I set the phone down and went back to the engineering report I'd been working on. I was still taking small jobs. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with the rest of my life, but I knew I wasn't going to stop working. Not completely. Carolyn had always said I'd die of boredom before I died of anything else. I didn't call Jason back that day. 3 days later, Meredith called. That was different. Meredith had never once called me independently in the 11 years she'd been married to my son. Not on my birthday, not after Carolyn died, not when I co-signed that loan and quietly mentioned I was nervous about it. Martin, how are you? We've been thinking about you so much. Jason feels terrible about how things went a while back. He really does. He's been wanting to reach out but wasn't sure if you needed space. We'd love to have you come for dinner. The kids keep asking about Grandpa. My grandson Owen was 8. He had asked about me. I was sure kids do. But I also knew that in the 14 months between my son telling me they didn't have the bandwidth and Meredith's call, neither of them had reached out once to check whether I was alive. That's kind of you, I said. I'll think about it. We really do want to make things right, she said. Her voice had that particular warmth of someone who has prepared for this conversation. Family is everything, you know, especially during hard times. I said I appreciated the call. I told her I'd be in touch. After I hung up, I called James. James had become something of a steady presence in those weeks. Henry had left him well provided for, and he was in the process of figuring out his own next chapter. But he'd told me at the will reading that if I ever needed anything, practical help, a recommendation, just someone to talk to, I should call. I took him up on it more than I expected. She called, I said. I thought she might, James said. How do you think she found out the amount? The will is a public document, he said, filed in probate, easily searchable. A pause. What are you going to do? I thought about the Walmart parking lot, the granola bar. The way Jason had said bandwidth as if I were a software update he didn't have room to install. I'm going to have dinner with them, I said. James was quiet for a moment. Are you sure that's wise? No, I said, but I want to see it for myself. I drove to Philadelphia on a Saturday evening. Jason and Meredith's house was lit up when I pulled in. I could see them moving around in the kitchen through the front window, the warm domestic light of a family getting ready to perform. Jason met me at the door and hugged me, which surprised me. He'd never been a hugger. Dad, it's good to see you. You look great. I looked the same as I always did. A little thinner, maybe. Meredith was in the kitchen making something with rosemary that smelled good. The kids, Owen and his younger sister, ran in briefly, said hi, and disappeared back to their rooms in the way of children who have been coached to make an appearance. We sat down to dinner. It was almost 45 minutes before the conversation turned toward anything real. We talked about the kids' school, a vacation they were planning to Portugal, a renovation they were thinking about for the downstairs bathroom. I ate my chicken and nodded and said the right things. Then Jason set down his fork. Dad, I want to say something. About last year. He glanced at Meredith. A shared look, coordinated in advance. I wasn't there for you the way I should have been, and I'm sorry for that. I let you down. I felt bad about it ever since. Have you? I said. He met my eyes. Yes, I have. I should have stepped up. Why didn't you? A pause. Things were complicated. Okay, I said. What was complicated? He looked uncomfortable. Meredith and I were going through a stressful period, and I let that affect my judgment. Meredith put her hand on his arm, supportive, united front. I looked at them both for a moment. Two people who had chosen, when it cost them nothing, to turn away. And now, when the math had changed, were turning back. I appreciate you saying that, I told Jason. I do. I meant it, partially. But I want to be honest with you. I'm not sure what we're doing here exactly. Are we reconciling because you feel bad? Or because something else changed? Jason's jaw tightened slightly. That's not fair. I think it's a fair question. We're family, Dad. We are, I said. That's true. But family means something. It's not just a word you use when circumstances get convenient. Meredith opened her mouth and then closed it. The dinner finished quietly. I helped clear the dishes, said goodbye to the kids, and drove back to my motel. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was angry. I'd moved past angry somewhere in that Trenton motel, but because grief and anger are different things, and grief takes longer. I was grieving the father-son relationship I'd thought I had, the one I'd apparently invented. A week later, James forwarded me something without comment. Just a note that said, "Thought you should see this," and an attachment. A screenshot of a text message exchange. He'd found it by accident, he said, while retrieving a document from a shared email thread involving Henry's estate attorney. Meredith had apparently copied the wrong address on a message. The exchange was between Meredith and her sister. Meredith, the attorney, confirmed 43M. No conditions on the bequest. Her sister. So what's the plan, Meredith? Jason's going to do the apology dinner. We need to get Martin to update his estate documents while he's still friendly. He doesn't have a financial advisor. There's no one managing it. If we can get him to name Jason as beneficiary or co-trustee, we're set. He trusts Jason, or he used to. Her sister, what if he doesn't go for it, Meredith? He will. He's lonely. Men like that always come around. They need family. I read it 3 times. Men like that always come around. They need family. I set my phone down on the table in my motel room and sat with that for a long time. The window faced the parking lot. The same parking lot where I'd eaten a granola bar and felt like I'd disappeared. I thought about Henry Bassett in his chair by the window, with his sharp, dark eyes, saying he preferred to be direct. I thought about Carolyn telling me I was the most boring success story she'd ever met. I thought about 31 years of building infrastructure that would outlast me, and how I'd spent all that time being steady for everyone else, and hadn't until now understood that I needed to be that steady for myself. I called a real estate attorney the next morning, and a financial planner the day after. I spent 2 weeks working through the practical details of what my life could look like. Not what it had been, not what I'd lost, but what was actually available to me now. I found a piece of property in the Catskills. 22 acres, a house that needed work but had good bones, a barn I thought I could convert. It was 4 hours north of Philadelphia and 12 miles from the nearest town of any size. I put in an offer the same day I saw it. I texted Jason once, briefly. I said I'd received his apology and I accepted it, and I wished him and his family well, and I hoped someday we'd find our way to something real. I said I wasn't in a position right now to be the relationship he was looking for. I said I hoped he understood. He didn't respond for 4 days. When he did, it was one line. "I don't understand, Dad. I thought we were trying to move forward." I read it and typed a reply and then deleted it. I thought about what Henry had said in that sitting room with the photographs of bridges. Build something useful. I thought about what I wanted the next chapter to actually look like. Not what it was supposed to look like. Not what Jason and Meredith had decided it would look like. But what I actually wanted. I bought the property in the Catskills. I hired a contractor to start on the house. I reached out to Drexel's engineering school, the same one Henry had endowed a scholarship at, and asked if they had any interest in a guest lecturer with 30 years of field experience. They did. I found a rhythm. It was slow at first, the way things are when you're rebuilding from a quiet place instead of a desperate one. I drove up to the property on weekends and walked the 22 acres and made notes in a notebook about what I wanted to do with the barn, with the land, with the years I still had. I had coffee in the morning on a porch that needed new boards and listened to the sound of nothing in particular. I didn't give Jason access to anything. I changed my estate documents to reflect reality rather than obligation, some to the engineering scholarship fund, some to a local land trust. A portion set aside for Owen and his sister directly when they were old enough, not filtered through their parents. I felt clear about all of it in a way I hadn't felt clear about anything in a long time. James came up to see the property in the spring. He walked around with me and said it reminded him of somewhere he'd been in Vermont, and we sat on the porch and had a beer and talked about Henry, about what it meant to get to the end of a life and know you'd used it honestly. "He talked about you after you left that day," James said. "He said you reminded him of the engineers he'd admired most. Not the ones who built the tallest structures, but the ones who understood load distribution." I asked what he meant. He said those engineers understood that a structure is only as good as its ability to distribute weight without concentrating it in one place. Too much weight in one spot, the whole thing fails. James looked out at the tree line. He thought that was a way to think about life. Don't let it all rest on one thing. One person. One plan. I thought about that for a long time after James left. I thought about 30 years of being the solid one, the one who didn't fall apart, who kept showing up, who co-signed loans and gave down payments and drove 4 hours in a rainstorm to fix a stranger's tire. I thought about the way I'd concentrated all of it in certain places. In Jason, in my belief that blood meant something automatic, and how the structure had failed exactly there. The contractor finished the house in late summer. It was nothing fancy, refinished floors, new windows, a kitchen that actually worked, a study where I put my drafting table and my books and a print Carolyn had found at a flea market years ago that I'd kept through everything. A covered porch with soundboards. On the first real night I slept there, I lay in bed and listened to the Catskills doing what they do. Wind, trees, something moving in the dark. And I thought about a Tuesday morning in a motel in Trenton, a granola bar in a Walmart parking lot, a man with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant what it said. I thought about what it meant to build something that would hold. I was 62 years old, and I was, for the first time in a long time, exactly where I was supposed to be.